To the Homework 1 video that will step you through Homework 1 and hopefully provide some guidance and insight and make it a lot easier to complete homework number 1. By now you've seen a few of my videos. I like to include some interesting things like sound effects and also attention-grabbing text. I just like to keep things a little bit interesting and make the videos a little bit more engaging than your standard video that you would see online. Anyway, okay, let's dive into homework 1. So there are 3 parts to this homework. We'll go over part A first. So this is create and run an Eclipse Java project. Essentially, it's letting you know, hey, there is a Word document on Moodle that will step you through everything this compile and run the first Java program. Definitely look that over a few times and step through it because we're going to be using Eclipse throughout the duration of the course. And then it says create a new Java class named this, replace John Doe with your name, and then it steps you through some of the other aspects of the assignment. So the assignment itself is actually really easy. The hard part is just getting Eclipse up and running, making sure your JDK has been installed successfully. The rest is actually pretty easy. So let's open up Eclipse. So I've got my Eclipse open. So it's wanting me to create a new project. So the way I do that over here in my Package Explorer, I right click, New Java Project. For the name, I'm actually going to name it John Doe Homework 1. I'll use my default location, so this is where it's stored on my computer. The JRE I'm using is 12. I just haven't updated to 14. It'll work the same no matter what runtime you use, so I'm using 12 in this. Separate folders, yep, that's what we want. Working sets, just ignore this for now. Click Next. On here, you can pretty much ignore everything besides this. We do not want this module info. So go ahead and deselect that. Click Finish. And now I've got my John Doe Homework 1 here. So if I select this little arrow, it'll show my JRE up here, which I'm using 12. You'll probably have 14. And then I have SRC, which stands for source. So this is where my source code is going to go. So in order to get a file in here, what I'm going to do is right click, New. Last time I selected Java project, but I've already created the Java project, so I'm within my John Doe Homework 1 project. So now what I want to do is add a class. So I'll go ahead and select the class here. Okay, so the Homework 1 instructions let me know that I'm supposed to name this file John Doe Welcome, so I'll go ahead and do that. I'll leave it as public. What I'm going to do is include this method stub of public static void main. Everything else I'll just leave blank. So the only 2 areas you actually have to really worry about are the name of it and selecting this. And you actually don't even need to do this, but I'm just going to do it just to show you. I'm going to select Finish. So here we have my John Doe Welcome public class. You can see it generated this method for me automatically as specified when I was setting up the class. What we're going to do is actually replace all of this code, and I want you to pay particular attention to the name of this class. So the name of this class is John Doe Welcome, and the name of the file is johndoewelcome.java. This is going to be important. So when I go and download the source code that is posted on Moodle Chapter 1, it looks exactly like this. Okay, so it's public class welcome, it's got that same main. The difference is it's got a print line here that prints stuff out to the console. So what I'm going to do is copy that, and watch what happens when I paste this in. I get an error, and why do I get this error? So if I hover over this, It says the public type welcome must be defined in its own file. What this is saying is, because my file name is called johndoewelcome.java, my public class needs to also be called johndoewelcome. And in fact, if you scroll down here, it has two quick fixes. So I can either rename the file to welcome.java or rename the type, which is the class, to johndoewelcome. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one and watch what happens. So you see how it replaced that, and now there's no error. So I'll go ahead and save, and I'll zoom out just so you can kind of see the. What you can do now is right select your project, go down to Show In, and go to your System Explorer. So this is where it's actually located on your computer. And on a Mac, all I have to do is right select and then select Compress. And there's my zip file. So this is what I'm actually going to submit on Moodle. Hopefully this helped you with part A, and we'll go right into part B. Part B of Homework 1 can be found within the Think Java textbook. So if you have the PDF file like I have open right now, we're concerned about exercise 2.2. Essentially what we're going to do here is concatenate different types. So we'll have an integer and a string and another integer and another string, and we're going to put those all together in output. It's a simple exercise, but it at least gets you coding and initializing variables and then outputting those variables. It steps you through. The only deviation that I have is the name of the Java file. So within the homework instructions itself, you're going to name it something different. If you happen to, by mistake, name it date.java, it's not a big deal at all, so don't worry about it. This is what it looks like in the textbook itself, and they show you kind of what the output should look like. So how do we do this? How do we get something to output in both an American format and a European format? So within Eclipse, I've already created a new project called JohnDoeDate. I've added a new public class named JohnDoeDate, and that is contained within the johndoedate.java file. When we go back to the homework, and what I'll do now is bring up the version from the actual homework sheet itself, I am going to copy this. What I'm going to do is paste it into here. And I should get errors immediately, right? Because it's saying we don't recognize what this code is. What's the deal here? All I'm doing here is using this for reference. So if I want to comment out multiple lines of code, what I can do is do something like this. Now this is a comment, okay? So this is a multi-line comment, whereas this is a single line comment, okay? But I want to use this as my reference. So I know at some point I'm going to have to print out something. So how do I do that? Well, I use something called system.out.println, which is print line. And if you read this here, it says it terminates the current line by writing the line separator string. So if you remember from C++, this new line character here will add a space. So whatever I use in here, it will automatically put that new line space, and the next printout would be on the next line. So here, since I know I'm going to have American formats, I'm going to do something like that. In Java, we end everything with a semicolon, so that looks good. And since I'm incredibly lazy, what I like to do is save some time, and I'll copy this. I'll paste this, but instead of American format, I'll just make it say European format, okay? So another good habit to get into is when you're making changes to your code, make sure you didn't break anything while you were doing this. So what I'll do is I'll go up here and run as Java application. And I see American format, and then on the next line, I have European format.
So that is kind of what I want to see at this point, right? So now we can get into the hard parts. What data types are we going to use for these things? How are we going to declare them, and how are we going to initialize them? Let's go ahead and look at the number 16. From your C++ days, Java is very similar. We'll go ahead and use an integer here. Let's go ahead and call this integer day, and we'll initialize it to the number 16 with a semicolon. Notice after I do this, I get a little, I'll call it a caution. This is just saying you've initialized this variable, but you haven't used it yet. So don't panic when you see something like that. Once we actually use it, it'll go away. I can assume that int day equals 16. I'll also assume that 2015 will be something similar, so I'll let you figure that out. So now let's take a look at July. So how am I going to store July? We need to store that as a string. In Java, string actually starts with a capital S. That is different from a lot of other languages. It's a common mistake I make when I switch from C++ to Java. And we'll call this month. String month equals, and to indicate strings, we use quotation marks. So I'll go ahead and type July in here, and I'll end this with a semicolon as well. I get the same caution. Now I'm ready to concatenate these two things. So what I'll do is let me make sure that this is all line so you can see it. How do I concatenate stuff? Well, let's do the same system.out.println. And what I want to do is show the American format of July 16th. Here's what I do. I'm going to go month. I'm going to have the addition sign plus day, semicolon. Awesome. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it, and let's see if it's close to my expected output. Well, it kind of looks correct. I've got July 16th, but according to this, I should have a space, and then after the 16, there should be a comma. So how do I accomplish that? To add a space, I'm going to put a string literal of basically a blank space, and I'm going to add that to the day. So let's see if this solved our spacing issues. And it did. So now I have a space here. So now the next thing I need to do is I need to have a comma here. Very, very similar to what I just did. Instead of a blank space, I simply add a comma, I save, and I run. And you can see I've got July 16th. I'm not going to do the whole assignment for you, but this is just a general overview of Part B. Now we'll go on to Part C. The exercise from the textbook is 1.15, and you're making a change to the rocket class source code as described above. And what it wants you to do is make the reload time quicker so that the rocket shoots faster. And that is all you're doing. So let's go ahead and open up Greenfoot. Now I've already opened up the asteroids scenario. So in order to run this scenario, there's a run button down here. Go ahead and run the simulation. Nothing happens. So why is that? It's because there's nothing in here. So I have an empty space, but I don't have my rocket. So in order to add a rocket to the space, I'm going to right select, click new rocket, and that is the constructor that allows me to create a new object of type rocket. I'm going to head and place it in the world. Now I'm going to select run and see what happens. When I press spacebar, I'm shooting. What the assignment wants me to do is make that shooting action quicker. If I go back to rocket and I double click it, I now see the source code of the rocket class, and I see there is a gun reload time variable. This is what I have to update. So I'm looking for the gun reload time, and sure enough, the gun reload time happens to be right here. Do you remember when I right clicked on rocket and it said new rocket and it had these here? This is actually the constructor So this is what's needed to actually create the rocket object. And if you don't understand this right now, that's fine. We're just getting warmed up and kind of getting you going on these assignments. But what I want to do here is I want to make this faster. So what if I change this to 5? So I've changed it to 5. Nothing actually happens yet. What I then have to do is go up and hit compile. It has my new variable of gun reload time equal to 5. It compiled, there were no errors, and it was saved. So then I'm going to close out of this, the source code. I'm going to go back to the rocket. I'm going to create a new one using that constructor that I just showed you. Place it into the world. I'm going to select run, and wait till you see how quickly it fires now. Look at that. Amazing, huh? That's all you have to do for that assignment. The tricky part will be zipping up your project file and submitting it, but I will let you figure that one out.